King David Studio podcast.
The EFF believes in the one leader controlling the party controlling the state controlling the economy and society. Disaster. The economy will crash out within a year. There'll be nothing. Disaster. Unemployment, when you think it's bad now at 60%, wait till it's 95%. Disaster. We can't go down that road.
Yeah. I say wait till Julius hears this. But it's a story for another time. Because I remember at some point...
Julius agrees with me. He agrees that he stands for leader controlling the party and the party controlling the state and the state controlling society. He agrees that that's his philosophy. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't agree on what the result will be. I'm telling him now what the result will be. Yeah. For free.
Is there a country that has had that similar approach to things?
Yes, Stalinism in Russia killed millions and millions of people.
One can argue that Russia is a relatively successful country.
When were you last there?
Well, not anytime soon, recently.
Swallow wouldn't be able to live the life she does if she was an ordinary girl in Russia, believe me.
Yeah. Let's talk to some of the issues that are pertinent to government, to South Africans, that are historic, like land. Mm. What is the view of the DA when it comes to land and the distribution of land that was stolen from those who owned it right in the beginning?
Well, anybody who can demonstrate that land was stolen from them should have a claim. Mm-hmm. I mean, if all the money that we've spent on the land restitution program of the ANC has simply been spent on market purchases of land that came willingly onto the market, we could have bought a third of all South Africa's land with that money that's been thrown down the drain with those schemes that they've got. So if that money had just been used in a proper way, we could be in a very, very different place today. Mm-hmm. A very different place today. Look, land is not a source of wealth. It's expensive dirt unless you develop it. And it's very difficult to develop land in a sustainable way so that it creates jobs and creates food or produces food. It's very difficult to do that. And if you just own a piece of land that no one wants to buy, it has no value to you at all. Now, the question we need to ask about land in South Africa is why our most fertile land, that is in very large measure in black hands, produces very little food and almost no jobs. The Ingonyama Trust. Why? Beautiful, fertile land. Why isn't it producing huge amounts of food and large numbers of jobs? Because you can create hundreds of thousands of jobs in agriculture if it's done properly.
However, South African land is not in black hands. Majority of South African land is not in black hands.
Let's look at the fertile land. Let's just look at the fertile land. The last figure I saw was that 73% of KwaZulu-Natal is in black hands. That is seriously fertile land. Mm. Rain, sun, everything you want. Now look at that land and say, is it producing food and jobs? Because that's what you want land for. You want land so people can get jobs and they can eat. Mm. That's the value of land to a country and to individuals, jobs and food. Now, why is our most fertile land not producing jobs and food? That is the most fundamental question about land we need to be asking in South Africa. Meanwhile, people want to come and fight about land in the Western Cape, which is not fertile. Mm. It takes incredible working to produce food off the Western Cape farms, mostly. Not all, but mostly. We need to be concentrating on, I think it's over 50% in the Eastern Cape that is in black hands, and the 73% in KwaZulu-Natal that is in black hands. Beautiful, perfect, arable land. Why is it not producing food and jobs? That's the question.
But you still can't deny me access to my land, even if I use it to put a tennis court. It's entirely what I choose to do with it.
If you want to use your land for a tennis court, but as a government, when people have private land, they can do what they like with it. Mm. But we are looking at feeding people and getting jobs for people. Those are the most important things to do. And so you can't just say, give me land, I want to build a tennis court. Then, you must purchase your land.
Yeah, because you know the land issues is something that for some reason has been struggling to shift. It's been what it is forever and ever and ever. You and I know the history of this country very well. We don't question that there is levels of injustice that has happened when it comes to the land issue. And you're saying you have to prove that I've stolen your land for me to be able to give it back to you in that context. But some would say the people who are able to prove it are long dead. They're nowhere near here. But I know that this historically used to be the land that belonged to the Mashabela people, and now it's owned by somebody else.
But that's why we've got the restitution program. And that's been so mismanaged that, we've spent literally hundreds of millions of it. If they just bought the land in the open market, they could have given it back, let alone spending these hundreds of millions in the way that they've been spending it. It's completely mismanaged, the entire process, right? So if you can prove that you were dispossessed of your land, even if it wasn't you or your father or even your grandfather, there should be a proper program, but it's got to be efficiently and properly run. And there are many, many people who are willing sellers of their land at reasonable prices, that all of that land restitution money can be used for. I mean, I saw different models of land restitution around the Duduans area in the Hex River Valley. And in several cases, farmers and their workers have bought up a neighboring farm. The workers got money from the state's fund to give them an equal share in the farm. Fantastic model of land restitution, working really well. Where they've handed it over to the ANC cronies and people like Nosy Peterson and others, absolute devastation. Nothing works. So, you've got to look at Zebedela. Once the most productive and biggest orange producing land in the world, citrus producing land in the world. Have you seen what it looks like now?
Yeah, it covered widely in the newspapers last week.
Now, is that a model of land restitution?
Yeah.
And do we feel better now because someone else owns the land, but there are no jobs there anymore? There's no food production anymore. There's no exports anymore. The question is how... It starts with land ownership, though. I have to own it first and then learn what to do with it. Well, you see, the bottom line is 73% of KwaZulu-Natal is in black hands, perfectly arable land. That's why I say exactly what you're saying. Let's start and get that land productive.
It's a tricky one. Your policies on economic development, which is where we are now in this conversation, what are some of the most basic policies within the DA that speak to the development of everyone, especially those that are previously disadvantaged in this country?
Well, we have an economic justice policy, which Gwen Ngwenya was primarily responsible for developing. A very, very good policy. And that looks at our major equity programs in terms of ensuring that we use the sustainable development goals as the yardstick and not race. Now, obviously, that's going to mean that most of the people who are going to benefit from that program are going to be previously disadvantaged people, i.e. black. But it is done in a non-racial way. And when it is done in a non-racial way, it can't be abused by the ANC, who says, I have a crony here who's a multimillionaire and he's going to give me a kickback of X, Y, and Z, so I'll pretend I'm doing BEE and I'll make sure that this CADA gets this tender or this contract. There's been massive abuse of that system and we want to get rid of that. We want to look at key things like, does the investment produce jobs? Does the land restitution produce jobs and food? Those are all the measures that we want to put on the table to measure whether something is really empowering and really benefiting disadvantaged people.
And in terms of, I'm going to touch on different policies. The one that has to do with the porous borders and foreign nationals in the country and so forth. What is the DA's stance on that?
Well, we believe that borders exist for a reason. And while borders are internationally recognized, they have to be properly policed. And we believe that the corruption and lack of capacity and neglect in investing in our borders has resulted in a system which is completely unsustainable. We cannot be the only country in Africa with a social welfare system that we've got and no borders. It means everybody or from the whole of Africa is going to end up here and then bribe somebody to get the necessary documentation and then get all the benefits of free basic services, of
you name it.
Child grants, of pensions, of whatever you want. We can't do that. It's not sustainable. We've got 7 million. Now, this is the most critical statistic in South Africa that I'm putting on this table now. We've got 7 million registered personal taxpayers. We've got almost 20 million grant recipients. You cannot work with that ratio. You cannot work with that ratio of taxpayers to grant recipients. It should be the other way around. There should be 20 million productive personal tax-paying citizens who support with a decent social wage the people who can't look after themselves. But that you only get through a growing economy. You only get that through a growing economy. Governments don't create jobs. They create the conditions for investment that drives economic growth and gets jobs. That's the only way to do it sustainably. And we've got it the other way around. We've got 7 million registered personal taxpayers, many of whom are immigrating. They pay huge rates of taxation. I once told somebody that, pay 45% of my income in tax. She says, what does that mean? I said, I pay it to the government. I'll never pay my money to the government. I said, no.
That's what happens.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
You pay your money to the government.
I'll come back to the porous borders and all of that in a bit, because you've introduced the subject of grants. What is the policy of the DA when it comes to this heavy burden that all South Africans have to carry?
Well, our position is this: we have to grow the economy significantly so that there are more people who can contribute to the fiscal pool.
Would you keep the 350 on?
Well, the 350 is just nothing. I mean, what you want is a proper grant system for people who can't look after themselves. What you want is jobs for everybody. 350 is an insult to people. 350 is not government delivering.
So you would get rid of it?
It's government recognizing their failure to deliver. That's what it is.
So you would get rid of it?
Well, we have a system, our grant system looks at more generous grants, but far more jobs. So that you're widening your tax base so that you've got a much bigger tax base. Let's say 20 million personal taxpayers who then can pay their taxes, and then you've got a much bigger pool for grants to subsidize those who really need it. Most people who get grants and who get the 350 actually want to work. They don't want to live on 350 a month. It's an insult. What we want is all of those people in productive jobs, not EPWP jobs. Those are not real jobs.
Yeah.
We want them in productive jobs, building the country, coming home with pride, with a salary, being able to look after their children and put a plate of food on the table and get a table to put a plate of food on in the first place.
Yeah.
That's what we want. And that's what all our policies are aimed at, to get people into jobs. And when they're into jobs, you've got a much bigger tax pool and you can pay better grants to obviously not as many
to fewer people,
because the people are in jobs.
Yeah. And one of your mayors, your former mayors, who has since left, your party started his own thing, Mayor Helen Mashaba at the time, was very strong against illegal South Africa. Well, those in South Africa who are not legally in South Africa, foreign nationals. What is your position on that subject as a DA?
We believe in the rule of law. And so if it's a country's law that you have to have met certain criteria to be in the country legally, we believe you have to meet those criteria. But if you're going to set those criteria, then you better have a very efficient Department of Home Affairs. And you had better have a very efficient border patrol that manages that properly. And you better have uncorrupt officials who are not prepared to take bribes to disregard the law and to give people fake documents. And so everything depends. If you want the rule of law, which we do, we are a party of the rule of law, it means that the rule of law has to be everywhere. You can't pretend that you've got a country on the rule of law that's going to make sure that every foreign national is properly documented to be in South Africa, but then turn a blind eye to corruption. It doesn't work that way. So we've got to have a whole country that respects the rule of law. And that is the DA's position. If you're having these criteria for foreign nationals to be in South Africa, it's fine. But you've got to then have a state that can administer them in a reasonable amount of time, that can have turnaround times, and that knows how to apply its own law without corruption.
King David Studio Podcast.